It's wonderful to feel so much appreciated and loved when we come here. Thank you to the Spanish heart. Thank you to the spirit and gentleness that is the Spanish culture. It's a beautiful thing. So, the title of today's lecture is called The Flame in the Mind. The Flame in the Mind. The concept here is that if we understand how you make a fire, how you make a flame with your mind, then we will also understand the solution to zero-point energy, free energy, implosion energy, and fusion. So if we understand how you make a fire with your mind, if we really understand the physics of consciousness, the flame in the mind, we'll understand the solution to our energy crisis, the solution to fusion, the solution to plasma. So to begin, I want to tell a little story. I used to be privileged to be invited to speak at the Cherokee shaman conferences in Sunray Meditation Society in Vermont, sponsored by the famous Dahani Wahu, who was a very famous Cherokee grandmother and shaman. And actually I feel her energy as I speak her name. And one day I was doing a lecture there, and this is just incidental, but we were teaching about some origins of the alphabet work. And you know how we've taught for years about how alphabet letters make a flame in your mind. We'll play the animations later. But I was showing the Haniwaho, the Cherokee, the Native American, I was showing them the sacred letters of the Ophanim Enochian here, the angel alphabet, Ophanim. Many of you have seen this. And she said, oh, that's the sacred alphabet of our star elder ancestors, the Adawi. And so she recognized this alphabet as the origin of Cherokee from the pure geometry of sacred alphabets. It was fun, it's fascinating. But that's not the story I want to tell right now. The story I want to tell you right now is what happened next. They had constructed a circle of trees for what they called the Cherokee Sacred Council of Elders. They called it the Arboretum. And the young Cherokee shaman, who for that year had been in training to become initiated and honored as a shaman in the Cherokee culture. And they had to prove that they had learned. And one of the things they had to do was they set this little brush in front of them, and they would sit there and focus. And if they could light the fire with their mind, then they were initiated. That was their test. And we watched. Now, there's another culture that does something very similar. Has anyone ever heard the English term, the Bonpo? You know, the Bonpo master of Tibet? Well, in English, we have a term for a fire. It's called the bonfire. Do you know where the term bonfire comes from? It comes from the Tibetan Bonpo. And what do the Tibetan Bonpo do? They light a flame, a fire with their mind. It's called the bonfire. Now, when the Tibetan Bonpo, when they light the flame, they have a massive ritual. We learned about this in Calgary with the wonderful sponsor of our lectures there, Terry Willard, Wild Rose College in Calgary, Canada. And they invite the Tibetan Bonpo there, and they come and they do this massive ritual. They would bring a truckload of sacred herbs, and they would pour them into this giant bonfire. And the bonfire would be lit, and it would be midwinter, and this fire would go like hundreds of feet into the sky. It was a huge flame that would burn for days. And that flame on the land, in a very special place, would accomplish incredible healing. Incredible healing. Now, I mean, there were stories told there in Calgary, this giant ancient dragon current, and there were people that claimed to see the dragon come out of the land, and we now know what that is. That's a plasma worm. That's a charged envelope. Yes, it's a living being. Yes, it's an elemental. And yes, it's living, charged plasma. And how did it get there? It was attracted. It was attracted to the flame. Now I want to tell you another story. There is a partner and friend of ours in Budapest. His name is George Edgley. And he is rather famous for carbon powder plasma fusion. And he claims that indeed he has a net energy gain when you have fusion in carbon powder. You know Rossi and Defcalion, they're doing fusion with nickel powder. Well, Edgley is doing fusion with carbon powder. Now, interestingly, Dr. Edgley claims that the part of the carbon powder in the flame, and by the way, he doesn't have $1 billion government budget. He uses a $100 microwave oven, actually. And he puts the carbon powder in there, and at a certain pressure and temperature, there is plasma. And the plasma does fusion. And he claims there's a net energy gain during fusion. Now this is the holy grail of science, the holy grail of physics. Is it in fact possible to gain energy during fusion? You know what gaining energy during fusion would be? That is, in some way that you gain energy during collapse, during compression, during implosion. Non-destructive compression, implosion, fusion, and gaining energy during collapse. These are all terms for the same thing. Now, Dr. Edgley claims that the part of the carbon powder that does the fusion is what he calls a carbon nanotube. You know what a carbon nanotube is? It's like a helix of single carbon atoms. But you know what carbon nanotubes are famous for? The geometry of a carbon nanotube is called a fullerene, as in Buckminster Fuller. And Buckminster Fuller was actually a good friend of mine. In fact, I have to say that I learned personally from Bucky Fuller this, from what he called the vector flexor. This would be an example of non-destructive collapse. Cube octa, ecosa. Actually, there's a dodecad in there. Octa. So this is called the jitterbug, as it was properly called by Bucky. And he taught me that personally. And it further collapses, as you know, into the tetra. So you had cube octa, ecosa, dodecad, octa, and tetra. All part of one implosive collapse. Anyway, years later, when science discovered what single carbon atoms, how they like to unpack or nest, they named that structure Buckminster Fullerene after my friend Bucky Fuller, the inventor of the geodesic dome and the Dymaxion car. And they named it Buckminster Fullerene because it looked like this. A geodesic dome. Actually, a stellation of dodecad, ecosa, dodecad, ecosa, dodecad, ecosa. We call this the Starbutter kit. It's available here. And Dr. Edgley claims that the part of the carbon that does fusion is this part. So what is it about this geometry that enables fusion, implosion, the perfect plasma flame? Well, the fun part well, first of all, Dr. Edgley now with our team we're doing the calorimetry with one of the world's leading plasma fusion experts, actually. actually. And we're going to prove, this science is advancing quickly in the field of fusion energy. But I want to tell you about the spiritual lesson here. This, to me, I would say it's more exciting than the physics, but this is the climax of the physics, is the spiritual lesson. And let me tell you what's most exciting then about the carbon powder fusion, which is, here's Edgley in his lab, and he's got these little glass balls, and inside there's this glowing plasma of carbon fusing. And it's claimed that atomic transmutation, alchemy, real alchemy, is happening. The term alchemy comes from alchem. Chem, K-H-E-M, was the original name for Egypt because it meant from the place of the blue-black blood. Blue-black blood. Enki's blood, Hermes. They were the black pharaohs. And it came to mean from the place of the bucanero, the black hole. So chem, as in alchemy and chemistry, transliterated means access to the place of the black hole. Literally, ability to make the black hole is how you transliterate the word chem, as in chemistry, alchemy. And when the early biblical scholars in the Bible, when they said, I will raise a Shem, I will raise a Shem unto the Lord, that word Shem, which became our word Shaman, a shaman, as in a Cherokee shaman, a shaman. In the Bible, the word Shem, I will raise a Shem unto the Lord. When you now read the Bible, that is your word, the altar in the church. So, an altar in a church is actually a Shem. Now, Zechariah Sitchin, he studied this term, Shem, from Sumerian for years, and finally he decided to translate the word Shem to mean highward fire stone. A firestone that goes into the sky. Literally, a flame. So, some kind of stone that makes plasma into a flame is the definition of altar in the church. Now, you know that if you put the stones in Stonehenge in the right geometry, it creates a flame of electric charge that dramatically causes seeds to germinate better and faster. So this is some kind of flame also, isn't it? It's a plasma flame. Now, the fun part of what Dr. Edgley is doing, and you can see pictures at greentechinfo.eu. Greentech, T-E-C-H, info.eu. Dr. Edgley in Budapest, carbon powder plasma fusion. Here's the fun part. This is what I'm challenging you scientists here with me today. I'm challenging you to explain this to me. Dr. Edgley is quite sure that when he has this plasma flame going, that anybody nearby that has a cold or an infection or is sick is healed. Oh yeah. This plasma fusion is absolutely, measurably a bioactive field, a healing field. You get plasma fusion going correctly, the opposite of fission, and suddenly everyone nearby is healed. Hello? Ask him. It's real. It's serious science. So now here we are, serious scientists. We need to know what it is about that kind of plasma flame that causes healing. Here are some clues.